the writer of Hebrews talks about this rest. Consequently, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For the one who has entered his rest has himself also rested from his works, as God did from his. Therefore, let's make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will fall by following the same example of disobedience. Okay, so when he's talking about the same example of disobedience, right before this, he had been talking about the Israelites in the way in the Old Testament, and the way the Israelites in the Old Testament had repeatedly rejected God over and over and over again. And so we learn in the Old Testament that God had decided not to let the Israelites enter into his rest because of the way they had constantly rejected him. So God had decided this. And so that's what the writer of Hebrews is talking about right here. So what is the writer of Hebrews talking about? What is this Sabbath rest? This rest that he's talking about, this rest that God decided he was not going to offer to the Israelites in the Old Testament for continuing to reject him. So what is this rest, Sabbath rest? It sounds very interesting. It sounds like something I would like. So I've just been talking about how busy we all are and how, we're always feeling tired and worn out, from life, way too busy. So this idea of rest sounds very intriguing, and I want to know more about it. Is this something that you and me and us Christians today that we can access? Because according to the Hebrew writer, we can. This is something that is available to us. So what is it, and how do we enter into this Sabbath rest? Okay, so that's what we're looking at today. So our culture has taught us to compartmentalize rest and work. Okay, so you know how we work 5 days a week and then we rest on the weekend, and then we take a vacation from our work so that we can rest from our work, right? So we compartmentalize that. But according to the rest, this whole idea of rest in the kingdom of heaven, it's a little bit different. And so what we're going to do, it's way deeper than that, okay? It's way deeper than just taking a break from work. So what I want to do is go to our source of truth, of course, which is our Bible, and see what it tells us about this rest. So the whole idea of a Sabbath day, it's introduced really, really early in the Bible in Genesis. In Genesis, the 2nd chapter, so very, very early, when God is still creating everything, the heavens and the earth. Okay, and so here is that story. And so the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their heavenly lights. So that's the sun and the moon and the stars and all the planets. So by the 7th day, God completed his work, which he had done. And he rested on the 7th day from all his work, which he had done. And then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because on it he rested from all his work, which God had created and made. Okay, so every single time we see this word rest throughout this passage, this is the word that is being used. This is the Hebrew word that is being used, Shabbath. And so what that word means is to cease, to desist, to stop working. So it's a very simple word, very simple meaning. This simply means physically stop working. So that's what it means in this case. Okay, so but we see this whole idea of the Sabbath next comes up in Exodus 20. And now this is when God is giving the 10 commandments to the Israelites through Moses. Okay, and so we see in the 4th commandment this whole idea of rest again. And so here's what it says. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male slave or your female slave, or your cattle, or your resident who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything that is in them. And he rested on the 7th day. For this reason, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Okay, so very interesting that every time you see the word rest in this passage, it is a completely different word than what we saw back in the Genesis story. So remember, that was Shabbat, okay? And that's where we get the word Sabbath from, okay? Shabbat is I believe, how they say it in Hebrew. And so that is just a simple, very simple physical stopping of working, okay? So the word that is used for rest in this passage is nuach. nuwak, and it means to settle down, to dwell, to remain, to repose, to be quiet, to obtain or be granted rest. Okay, so if you think about it, you can understand how this actually takes this whole idea of rest a little bit deeper, right? So the Shabbat rest is just physical. Okay, just stop working, just stop, just sit down. Okay, but here, this nuwak is more of an internal rest. Okay, you are settling down, you are dwelling, you are reposing, you are quiet, you are obtaining and granted rest. Okay, so it's more of an internal state. Okay, an emotional, a mental, and even a spiritual state that is described by this word nuach. Much deeper. It's much deeper and more meaningful than the Shabbat that we saw in the Genesis account.